What's a common healing trend that actually keeps people stuck?
I know biohacking is a big trend these days, that people are really craving longevity. However, I think the reason that why we're chasing longevity is because we don't know how to be with ourselves when we're young. We're reaching for the supplement or this kind of therapy or this kind of practice, when a lot of that can actually be mirrored in the biology. Get out in nature, connect and co-regulate, cuddle with one another, laugh, dance. The people who live the longest, they're not reaching for these manufactured things that we actually have access to all the time if we just slowed down again to be present. I feel like it's, again, another way that we're being robbed of the answers that are really like inherently within. We were designed to heal, from the inside out. And we are obsessing over what can I externally grab to complete myself.
The word itself, the energy around biohacking yourself just feels gross.
Yes.
Britt Piper, welcome to Rooted in Wellness.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here. When I was into your profile, I just thought, now's the time to talk about somatic experiences through the body, how to have release. And I think it's a topic that's really trending, but a lot of people don't really understand how it pertains to them. So we're going to get to all of that goodness today. But before we dive in, this podcast is all about ancient rituals in our modern day world and really how we can all tune into becoming more rooted. That's rooted in the power of ourself, our bodies, our mindset, our ability to heal. It's that feeling, right? Of feeling rooted, which I know you know very well. So can you tell me, what are 3 things that cause you first to feel uprooted when you feel dysregulated?
Oh, narrow it down to 3, huh?
I know, right? Yeah, in today's modern world, how can you narrow it down?
So I would say busyness.
Yeah.
When I feel urgent, I'm like, is this pace my own or is it someone else's? So definitely that. Because I'm craving slowness more in my life, which is, I'm sure we'll get to, is not really what I grew up with. I'd say, I know we were just chatting about this before I got on, but busy cities, just my system doesn't land well. I was recently in New York for my book tour, and the busyness, the commotion, the chaos, the stimulation. It's funny because I used to live in New York. And I look back now and I'm like, oh, my life was a little different then, very dysregulated. But I think just for me and personally, being in a space where I can really root into nature and the slow rhythms of nature really feels just grounded and aligned. And then also being plugged in all the time.
Yeah.
I've really learned that over the years, especially having kids that are young. It's so important to unplug. I don't want them staring at the back of my cell phone.
Absolutely.
I remember growing up looking at the back of my mom's laptop. So I'm like, this is kind of the new thing that really disconnects us from people. So I feel really uprooted when I'm plugged in all the time. And I've had to draw some pretty good boundaries around that, with work and being on social media and podcast, all these things. So when I'm plugged in too much.
Yeah. And what's interesting with you as a guest today is a lot of what we're going to be talking about is what helps us feel supported in becoming rooted again. And it's such a big part of my philosophy that for any healing protocol to actually work, you have to be in a regulated state. That's what it was like for me. And we're going to talk into specifics, but do you have a ritual every day that helps you feel more rooted before you get going?
I do. Yeah.
What does it look like?
So it's waking up before the house wakes up. I'm lucky because my family tends to sleep in a little bit. But I usually wake up early. I have my alone time. I'll have my magic mind. I've taken magic mind for years and years.
Lovely.
And I will go and I'll open the windows in the house. I sit in the front room with my dog while the coffee is going. I'll do my morning reading or devotional, whatever it is. And then I go and I get in some movement. So we just recently added a gym out in our garage. So whether it's getting on my treadmill and doing a Nordic track hike or, doing some lifting, I really love lifting. I found that to actually be really therapeutic in my healing. And then usually the kids are getting up around then. My husband's slowly rising. He's not a morning person. And then we go on our morning walk. We try and get out, even if it's just 10 minutes around the block with the dog. And then it's kind of getting everyone off to do what they're doing for the day and then settling into work. or homeschool. My son is in a hybrid homeschool, so he's at school
Very cool.
2 days a week, homeschooled the other 2 days. So yeah,
We would mirror each other's morning rituals.
really,
If we
I
were
love
neighbors.
that.
We'd be waving from our window.
Yeah.
All right. So before the deeper questions, we like doing some rapid fire. So whatever comes to mind intuitively, what's one body signal that you never ignore anymore?
When I start to leave myself, I spent a lot of my life dissociated.
Yeah.
And so when I feel like I'm starting to leave or I'm not really present, I have to take a bit of like a let me ground, which is like a moment ago when I was like, let me take a minute to just kind of settle in. Yeah. So leaving myself is probably the one thing I'm really intentional about bringing myself back.
We should talk about that because I really feel, I call it decapitation. My head literally decapitates from the wisdom of my body.
Yeah.
Where I'm not as effective, productive, clear, or grounded. So we'll dive into that. What's one thing that most people misunderstand about trauma?
Oh man, there's so many. There's so many. I would say that trauma, I think the one thing that most people misunderstand is that it's something that happens to you. Most oftentimes, it's also about what you didn't receive when that thing happened to you. So in a lot of my work, I often will see differences in someone who's experienced the same thing, right? Same experience over time or cycle or a catastrophic event, yet they handle it or they move through it so differently. And the big difference there is that one person might have had an empathetic witness. They might have had a support system. They might have had the practices or the capacity within their nervous system to really move through it. Whereas the other person maybe didn't grow up in an environment where that was modeled to them. Maybe they didn't have an empathetic witness. And so I think sometimes it's less about what happened to us and more so about also like what didn't we receive.
That is so good.
Moments.
Something that's never talked about.
Yeah.
If you could teach the world just one nervous system skill, what would it be?
Presence.
What an
Presence.
art.
We are missing presence in our life. And even like just sitting here and being with you, like I can feel really present, whether it's in your eyes or the tone of your voice. And I think we are overriding and kind of coasting through life. And I know so much of that is cultural and just, from this really fast-paced world that we live in. And I don't want to say it's silly that we have to go and I got to go live in the mountains to get away.
Exactly.
There are everyday moments where we can choose to be with presence, because when we really go inward with ourselves, there's so much wisdom there. I mean, I know you're talking about rooted in wellness and these ancient practices, but really we are the ancient wisdom. And I think when we're so disconnected, we miss out on a lot of those answers. Like that silence is so full of answers, but we're so scared of being with it. So yeah, I would say presence.
Yeah. And this ties into my next question too. Can you imagine the impact if we were taught that to be fully happy and healthy in this world, presence had to be built into our everyday life? And this is through every social structure, work structure, school structure. It just hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So what's one thing that you wish that you'd learned about the body 20 years ago?
Oh man.
Presence.
Presence. Yeah. One thing I learned about the body 20 years ago, that it's not the enemy.
Yeah.
I feel like we look at our world today and it's like we look at everything as something to fix, everything external, whether it's like we are these problem creatures, like there's a problem in my business, I'm going to find the solution, or we create entire businesses around providing solutions to problems. We look at our relationships, what's the problem? How can I fix it? What's wrong with my body? How can I fix it? And I think that if we grew up with more of this perspective that not everything needs to be fixed, and that our body isn't something to be fixed, and that it's incredibly wise and has a lot of the answers. Like it doesn't have to be the enemy.
Absolutely.
People come to me all the time. They're like, what can I do to regulate my nervous system? And we're so focused on nervous system work and vagus nerve stimulation and, biohacking, and all those things are great. And I'll talk about it till I'm blue in the face. But if the relationship that you have with yourself and the work that the intention behind doing this work is rooted in this place of, I need to fix myself, then you are always, always, always going to be chasing that next thing, that next modality, that next practice. So I think that would probably be the biggest thing, is that your body is working for you, not against you. And sometimes the muscling against it and the armoring against it actually makes us, quote, worse.
So good. And what a great lens. I often coach my clients to shift from fixing to nourishing, because I really think that the mindset of chronic fixing is associated with chronic imbalances and chronic illness.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. What's a common healing trend that actually keeps people stuck? Let's take a quick break from this episode because I want to share a practice that's brought so much calm and vitality into my life: my Sunlighten infrared sauna. Stepping inside feels like I'm giving my body and my mind a reset. The gentle infrared heat supports heart health by improving circulation. It helps our body detoxify by clearing things like heavy metals and toxins. It eases stress and even boosts our mood and our sleep quality. Plus, regular sauna sessions actually combat what scientists call inflammaging, that chronic low-grade inflammation that drives aging and disease. I step out feeling lighter, calmer, and more energized every single time. What makes Sunlighten different is their smart sauna technology that takes personalized wellness to a whole new level. Their patented 3-in-1 heaters deliver the perfect wavelength for far, mid, and near infrared, plus red light therapy. It's like dialing in a specific radio station for healing. You simply choose your health goals, and the sauna seamlessly adapts through data-driven programs that offer specific blends of each spectrum for optimal results. With 95 to 99% effective infrared absorption and ultra-low EMF, non-toxic construction, every single session is both powerful and perfectly safe. It's actually become one of my favorite healing rituals. If you've been looking for a powerful way to support your energy, your detox pathways, your hormones, your mood, your longevity all at once, I cannot recommend Sunlighten enough. And right now, you can save up to $1,400 with using the code MONA, M-O-N-A, at sunlighten.com. That's sunlighten.com, or use the link in the show notes below.
Well, this might be a bit controversial.
I know I just brought up. Let's go there. Let's go there.
I know I just brought up biohacking. I know biohacking is a big trend these days, and I think what my way from understanding it is that people are really craving longevity, longevity in life, and of course, whether it's our food systems, whether it's the environment that we're living in, those things definitely are decreasing our mortality rate. They're decreasing our life expectancy. However, I think the reason that we have such a hard time growing and why we're chasing longevity is because we don't know how to be with ourselves when we're young. We don't know how to be with those young parts of us.
Yeah.
We don't know how to, so we're seeking for we're reaching for the supplement or this kind of therapy or this kind of practice, when a lot of that can actually be mirrored in the biology and in the body if we participate in play, if we get out in nature, if we connect and co-regulate and cuddle with one another. Like when we laugh, we dance, tribes around fires. Like these people, indigenous cultures, they don't reach for
hacking.
The people who live the longest, they're not reaching for these manufactured things that we actually have access to all the time if we just slowed down again to be present. And so I always get emotional talking about this because I feel like it's, again, another way that we're being robbed of the answers that are really like inherently within. Like, I just truly believe that we were designed to heal, from the inside out. And so when we are obsessing over what can I externally grab to complete myself, to make myself more whole, to belong, it's like, you already belong, and you belong just as you are. Everything around you tells you that you belong. And I don't know if that answered your question, but the biohacking and longevity thing, I think we're a little off on that.
Yeah, you're talking my language.
Yeah.
the word itself, the energy around biohacking yourself just feels gross.
Yes.
Why not bioharmonize, come into harmony with your body, coherence with your body, right? And I love the examples that you brought up as well, because they're not part of people's systems of understanding how to bring the body back into balance.
Yeah.
Right? So no more hacking. No more hacking. I said
love
that to
that.
Dave Asprey too.
Yeah.
He believes in that, but I think that he understood the power of the word hacking and the attention that would give him as well.
Well, I mean, a lot of the nervous system practices out there, and I will be the first one to admit that, it has taken a lot of time and reflection and moving inward. I am by no means perfect. And what I'm saying here is not from a place of, I know how to do this perfectly.
Yeah.
Because I still struggle with these things. I still reach for the biohacking stuff, sometimes from not the best intention. And so I am living that work right now.
Absolutely.
But there was a time where I used to, kind of promote like nervous system, like how can we hack the nervous system, years ago. And I'm like, wait a second, we can't hack the nervous system.
It's like the red pill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We come into alignment with the nervous system. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big part of my learning, even as a practitioner, and even with the intention of this podcast. I want full authenticity. I find myself often drifting into the trends and drifting into the dangling carrots that we hear on social media until shit, I'm doing it again.
Right.
Come
Well,
back.
I think there's a lot of curiosity there too, because I do think the gift of curiosity is that we're able to find so many wonderful ways to support ourselves when we're up against, again, a world that physically, somatically, connection, relationally, we are disconnected. And so I think it's only natural to get curious about things. But I think that we're doing it, if we do it from this perspective of all of the answers are outside of me rather than they're here and what can I use to complement my life or complement that wellness.
Yeah, I love that. So what is that feeling then? What's an emotion then that you found you used to avoid, but now you embrace?
Shame.
Shame.
Oh, shame.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
A lot of people, especially I noticed through my coaching, it's the one area of resistance that we want to go to because it's so painful.
Yeah.
Right? Do you use David Hawkins' chart of vibration? Do you ever
I've heard of it
reference that?
before.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So shame is like this lowest vibrational feel.
Yes.
Right? And if there's any of that resonance that's alive within us, we take that out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like something that anchors us like a ball and chain.
Yep.
And here we are reaching for enlightenment and happiness and joy and peace. But until we process that, it's something that, despite all of our best efforts, it feels like it's unattainable.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So we both have, I would say, a powerful story that brought us into this journey.
Yeah.
I think that's so important for our clients to hear, for our listeners to hear. I think that's so important for our listeners to hear. So can you share a little bit about what led you to somatic healing to begin with?
Yeah. Oh man, the long story or the short story?
Yeah, I would say
medium tiered. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What led me to somatic healing? So I really think that the path started when, we could go back. When we talk
starts
about
at childhood.
Yeah,
I get it.
it starts at childhood, but I was even saying, intergenerationally, epigenetically, we can look at, and this is something I explored in my book, is the lineage of women in my family and how we all carried this kind of armor that I have to muscle through life. I have to stand on my own. No one's going to be there for me. And that my worth is really found in my success. So there is, we could go back to that. But for me, I would say that really the quintessential moment was my birth, actually. So when my mother was pregnant with me, she was a young mom. She was 19. She had already had my brother at 17. But she was single. She was homeless. She was living out of a car when she was pregnant. And so she was going through a very traumatic time in her life. I won't go into those details. But when I was born, I was taken by foster care. I'm sorry. When I was born, I was taken by Child Protective Services and I was placed in foster care because there was methamphetamine found in our system. And I think that was really kind of the starting block for me. I was in foster care for a number of months. I was reunited with my mom and was kind of taken in by my grandparents while she got her life, back on track. And she did that relatively quickly. So I grew up with a roof over my head. My mom really excelled professionally. She is incredibly successful. My stepdad was around when I was 2 years old. And so I grew up, in the suburbs in the Midwest with a pretty normal life. But there was always this shadow that was kind of chasing me of shame. And it was this belief that I'm not good enough. I felt very disconnected, very anxious, the I don't belong here feeling. And it would show up in small ways. I'd pick apart my body. I would really filter myself as a child. I was very reserved, very withdrawn. Looking back, my mom used to say, "You were the good kid because you were so quiet." And I'm like, I wasn't good. I was detached. And so I grew up in an environment where, again, things seemed normal. But then I lost my older brother in a car accident when we were in high school. And my parents, again, they were kids raising kids. My mom had never really acquired the healthy tools to cope. Her way of coping was burying herself into work or distraction. It was just, how can I avoid today? And that was her escape. So they were back at work, within a week. And the grieving process wasn't really laid out for us. And so I started heavily getting into substances in high school. And by college, I ended up in a hospital bed with alcohol poisoning where I flatlined in an ambulance.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And then at the age of 20, at this point I was in AA because I thought alcohol's the problem. No, that was the external.
Yeah,
that was
course.
actually the solution to help me not feel pain.
Absolutely.
The problem was that I didn't know how to live with pain and discomfort. And then at the age of 20, I was sexually assaulted by a stranger who helped me change my flat tire.
Good God.
Yeah. And that was traumatic in itself. But I think that the aftermath and in the work that I do. Hello, Dora.
Hello, Dory.
You good? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the work that I do now with survivors. I have a background in women's studies with concentrations in gender-based violence and violence prevention. So since 2012, I've worked in that space. But what we find is that typically with something like sexual assault or abuse or domestic violence, really any kind of trauma where there's an exertion of power or a boundary rupture or an inescapable attack, is that there's the experience, but then there's also the aftermath. And these are two separate traumas usually. And so for me, this man had been in and out of the prison system his entire life. He knew how to work the system. So our trial was postponed 9 times.
Oh my God.
Over a 2-year period. And when that happens, it's kind of like you have to go through like a dress rehearsal to prepare for trial. And that meant 9 times I had to practice being on the witness stand, listen to my tape statements, go through my depositions. 9 times over a 2-year period, I had to relive every graphic detail of that night. And so I was at a really difficult time in my life. I had started drinking again. I found myself, and this is a whole separate episode, I found myself in an abusive relationship, which commonly happens or often happens. And eating disorders, suicidal ideation, kind of the full spectrum of PTSD. And so we finally went to trial. He was sentenced to 60 years behind bars. And I think I remember during that time thinking to myself, like, if and when he's convicted and sentenced, I'll be okay. I'll go back to normal. I'll get back to the happy Brittany that I was, the drinking, like everything will stop. And what I found, and I'm sure we could talk about the science behind why this happens, which a lot of survivors are confused by when they come into, which a lot of people who start the healing journey are confused by when they get into somatic healing. But I did not get, quote, better. I got, quote, worse. And so when I was on the witness stand, I remember being very dissociated, which makes sense because I'm facing my perpetrator. It's very overwhelming. But I remember the news segment, watching it back later that night, and the news anchor saying, 20 years of covering court trials, we've never seen a rape victim who was this strong, this composed, this poised. And looking back now, again, it's kind of like, my mom, you were such a such a good, quiet baby. And I'm like, no, I was really disconnected. Like I was actually at the worst point in my biology. Like when we are numb, when we feel nothing, that's the most terrifying thing to our body because it shows that we're not alive. And when I came out of that trial, what started to really emerge was anger, a lot of anger.
Mm-hmm.
And not even 30 days after the sentencing, this is kind of the turning point I'm getting to here, is I ended up in a jail cell. Which is not, people who know me, they're like, you?
Exactly.
You,
Really?
yeah, but I was out one night with my boyfriend who was drinking and driving. I always say that should give you a good indication of where I was at that time in my life, now 15 years removed. He was pulled over, arrested, and when the police officers went to physically pull me out of the car, I had a flashback from the night of my assault of a stranger, of a man touching me in a car, which is where the assault happened. And I snapped. My body and my nervous system went into a trauma reenactment. I tried to fight back. So I ended up in a jail cell with 2 counts of battery on an officer.
Unreal.
Yeah. And I remember calling my dad from the jail, telling him what happened. And there wasn't disappointment in his voice. It was more so this fear. And I remember him saying, if you don't learn how to stop running from your pain, you're gonna kill yourself. Wow. So that was really the turning point for me. And I remember sitting in that 6x8 jail cell. My dad's like, by the way, we're not going to bail you out. You're going to sit there for a couple of days. But it was in that jail cell that I was forced to really like confront and sit with all this discomfort that I had become so good at, running away from. There was no alcohol, no pills, no busyness, no shitty relationship, crappy boyfriend. There was nothing between me and everything that I had been trying to avoid all of my life. And so over those 3 days, I experienced these things in my body that had never happened before. There was intense shaking, sweating, trembling, so much crying, wailing, emoting. I mean, it just felt very primal. And I remember leaving the jail cell feeling so different. Like I just felt, I like to tell people, I'm getting goosebumps now. I don't know if it's the wind but I often tell people it's like I felt like this dough, like just like walking in my body. Mm-hmm. And then kind of the full stamp moment was when I went before the judge as they were releasing me, and she knew who I was. She said, "You're the survivor from that sexual assault case." By the way, she looked like Judge Judy. I feel like that's always important to to say. And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "We're going to drop the charges, but she said, you need to learn how to live with your pain better." And I think that just kind of like smacked me in the face because here I was all my life trying to learn how to get past my pain, move on from my pain, release my pain, right? How often do we hear that? I just want to release my trauma.
Yeah.
And I realized in that moment, because my perpetrator, I'm like, wow, I was behind bars at the same time as my perpetrator, and it was just this full circle moment. I also started to reflect on like not excusing what he did, but explaining. They talked during the trial about how he was orphaned at the age of 2, raised by an aunt as one of 15 kids, poor schooling, mental health problems. And I was like, wow, we were both dealt this same hand in life, pain. Yeah. And he was choosing the path of bitterness, and I was very much so heading down that same path. And I knew I needed to make a radical choice to change my life. And so I left that jail cell. I remember meeting with my therapist. Mind you, I had been in traditional therapy for years and years. And that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, reliving it every time.
Yeah. And I remember going and telling her, I feel different in my body, explaining what happened. And that's when she said, I wonder if you should also work with like a somatic therapist. And I'm like, what's somatic? What is that? Yeah, this foreign thing to me. And so I started working with a somatic therapist. And what was beautiful is we didn't have to get into all the hurt from my past in order to heal. It was like really just navigating how to be with discomfort in my body, how to be with small, tolerable moments of anger and activation, and growing my capacity to be with all of my somatic body experiences without getting overwhelmed. And it it completely transformed and changed my life. So that's the long story. I know we were supposed to keep it
Yeah,
medium,
no,
but
what an incredible story. I have goosebumps from head to toe. And just really just seeing you in a prison cell by yourself, what that must have been like. What's interesting is something that comes up for my husband and I lately. We talk about this concept of retreat. We think that going away to a retreat should be this magical, feeling. It's what we think we need. But when we think about breaking down the actual word retreat, you're retreating from battle. You're retreating from war. You're going somewhere for safety. And here you are all by yourself. The courage that it must have taken to retreat in solitude without guidance around you and support. And
I love that. I'm going to take that with me. I really love that. Yeah.
And I think that will also resonate with a lot of our listeners who have had these traumatic things happen to them, whether it was to the degree that you experienced or whatever other type of trauma that it was. The experience within the physical body is often the same, right? It's how we end up process. Shame is shame, regardless of what brought you to that. Fear is fear, anger is anger, resentment is resentment. But understanding what this concept of letting go, and for the judge to say, live with the pain better. Just like the understanding in society, it's like, oh, do better at holding on to all that, right? Don't let it out. Just keep it stuffed in. So for our listeners today who, they've tried journaling, they've tried talk therapy, they've done the mindset work, but they still feel dysregulated today. Can you help them understand what is actually happening in the body when we're holding on to that trauma?
Absolutely. Yeah, so this is probably, I would say, one of the pillars of somatic experiencing. So somatic experiencing is one of the modalities that I would say, lead with the most. I'm trained in different modalities like internal family systems and somatic attachment therapy and polyvagal theory. But SE is really the framework that holds this understanding that trauma can be defined as anything that overwhelms the nervous system's capacity to cope. And it was developed by Dr. Peter Levine back in the 70s. And what I love about Peter's work is that he really leaned into ethology, which is the study of animals in the wild, asking the question, why is it that when animals experience threat or anything that, overwhelms their nervous system, they don't say that they don't stay traumatized?
Yeah.
Right. And the reason he asked that question is because we are human animals. We have a lot of the same kind of primal, ancient structures within the brain that animals do. We have the reptilian brain or the brain stem at the bottom, which is our center for sensory information, impulse. The cerebellum is back there and it oversees and governs all of the major body systems. And then we also have this wonderful midbrain right in the middle, the limbic system, or what we call the mammalian brain. This is the emotional brain, the center for connection and attachment. It's also where our amygdala lives, which is our little alarm center in the brain. But these two structures are known as your subconscious or subcortical brain. And so in the somatic world, we work with the subconscious subcortical. And so animals in the wild, they have these wonderful structures. And this is also where the nervous system operates from, the subconscious subcortical. But what makes us different as human animals is we have this fantastic conscious brain, the neocortex, the human brain that sits right on top. And that is our cognition, that's our rationale, that's our learning, our creativity, verbal memory and processing. And when he started to study animals in the wild, he found that animals in the wild, when they face routine threat, they are not talking themselves or rationalizing themselves out of the natural impulses of the body. So when we feel anger, when we feel offended, when we feel afraid, what do we do as humans? We're often like, am I allowed to feel that? I need to push that down. Am I being too dramatic? Am I being too much? Oh, I can't be anxious. I need to breathe this through. And so we have really kind of crippled like the ancient, again, wisdom of the body. And there's a physiological component to this. So when a bear, let's say a mama bear, is with her cubs out in the wild and she notices there's, I don't know, apex predator, there's a wolf circling her and her little family. That bear is probably not going to be like, oh, should I should I charge? Should I bluff? Should I growl? Like, do you think the wolf is going to be offended? Right? No, that mama bear gets up on her feet. And we feel this as mothers too, that primal
You
instinct.
got it.
She gets up on her feet. She charges. She bluffs. She will show her teeth. And so she's stepping into her life force, her healthy aggression. And when she does this, the nervous system goes into a fight response. She's then flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, which are the stress hormones that mobilize the body and initiates our stress response cycle. We have that same stress response cycle. But what happens is when we either our nervous system gets overwhelmed and we are not able to fight or flee, or this is often the case when we suppress the emotional charge, which is adrenaline and cortisol, of our fight or flight responses like anger, anxiety, then what happens is those stress hormones get stuck in the body and it becomes chronic stress. And then we get stuck in this chronic stress response. So you can kind of think of it like your nervous system goes into survival mode. And then if we don't allow the body to process that and for the adrenaline and cortisol to be released, what we call discharging, and people might be like, well, how does that happen? So just kind of to put that a little more plainly, discharging happens when we cry, when we tremble, when we have sweat, when we emote, when it can happen in movement. It can happen yawning, absolutely. Yep. And so there are lots of ways that we can discharge. But again, if we are suppressing and pushing it down, it all just stays trapped within the body. And over time, there are neuroanatomical changes that happen in all of the body systems, the immune system, the digestive system, the endocrine system, the reproductive system, cardiovascular. And so all of these working systems will change or kind of dim or tamper themselves down in order for this survival system to really take the driver's seat. And over time, when you live in that environment, adrenaline and cortisol are so healthy for us.
Absolutely.
In normal doses.
Exactly.
But when we're there chronically, it can make us sick. Yeah.
When I work with people, more often than not, people don't want to go there. They don't want to address the past. And we live in a society that also celebrates hypervigilance, productivity, success. And I think, we can wear with a badge of honor, oh, I'm an adult now. I don't have to think about that stuff. I don't have to worry about that anymore. But I would really love all of our listeners to think about anything that could have happened to you as a child. When is the first time that you felt shame, unhappiness, lack of trust, resentment, fear, anger? How old were you? And just think about whether you knew how to process it at that time. I can imagine for your children, as with my children, I'm really focused on supporting them in processing emotions that come up. And you certainly didn't have that. I didn't have that as a child. And I can remember specifically the things that happened that led me to internalizing everything. And like you growing up, people would always compliment, Mona, you're so calming and soothing. Mona, your voice is so calming. Until one day I finally said, this was I did this for survival. I had to be quiet. I had to internalize everything. I had to be the calm one in my house. Now I can wear it as a gift, and I understand my kind of pain to purpose aspect of that. But when we think about symptoms that are being held within the body for our listeners, in the lens of how you work with your clients, what types of symptoms do you see come up?
Yeah. Well, they can really kind of vary in many ways. I would say some of the emotional, symptoms we could say would be anxiety, depression, rage, shame, and then from more of the somatic lens, the body-based lens, you're going to see a lot of things like that hypervigilance that you talked about. Chronic fatigue is probably the number one thing that I see in the clients that I work with. Fibromyalgia, chronic pain, migraines, a lot of digestive issues. We're seeing this, of course, I know that you're a health coach, especially in women, and a lot of the studies have come out and really correlated that to the kind of the silent suffering that women do, or the self-silencing that women do. Not expressing how they feel, not prioritizing themselves, and how that really shows up in the body. especially in relation to anger, right? We
Yeah.
have this healthy aggression, this life force, and women really turn that down. And so, yeah, those are probably the most common symptoms that I would say I see.
I get really sad when we think about the state of the world today, all of the children that are in war-torn
Yeah.
places, what they're going to have to process
Yeah.
growing up. And when we think of how you brought up the generational aspect as well, I come from a family lineage of autoimmune disease and rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
And when I understood through Ayurveda and through yoga that issues that where we hold on to inflammation within our joints is unprocessed trauma that we store
Yes.
within. And there's so many of these mystery illnesses from chronic fatigue syndrome to fibromyalgia. And I think it's really important for listeners to understand, like, if there's things that you're suffering from, sometimes that you're just like, this doesn't make sense. I really am doing all the right things on paper.
Yeah.
Is there further investigation that they can go through? And I think, from your studies, and now we understand science is finally proving that trauma can be generational. It's transferred through DNA.
Yeah.
So this really is a time and a place for people to really understand somatic healing and how this can be a game changer in how we show up every single day.
Yeah. And I would add to that too, that there's kind of two different groups of people that come into my work and my practice. I've been through trauma and I know I need to work through it. And then I have the signs and symptoms that I have nervous system dysregulation, that I've been through trauma, but I don't know what it is. And the beautiful thing about that is that the path actually looks the same for the both.
Wow.
Most people assume, again, that we have to go back and understand, well, what was the core wound? What was the point of hurt? Where was the moment, whether within my lifetime or in previous lifetime, that I had to learn to armor up or have some of these survival management strategies? And although sometimes it can help, we do core wound work in my program, having that context and just being witnessed in that way can be really powerful. But in SE, we work with body memory, implicit memory, but more specifically, we work with procedural patterns. So procedural patterns are a form of body or implicit memory, kind of like muscle memory. So procedural patterns are the ways that your body autonomically responds or reacts to things without you consciously thinking about it. And Bessel van der Kolk, the author of The Body Keeps the Score, he commonly says trauma doesn't come back necessarily as a story. It comes back as a reaction. The ways that we shut down, the ways that we dissociate, the ways that we become hypervigilant, the ways that our stomach clenches, the ways that there's tension, constriction. And so in SE, following the ethology route, ethology is a study of animals in the wild, we are trained to study human implicit behavior. So little things in a session with someone, what I'm tracking is body patterns. Like anytime we talk about conflict, I notice that they turn away to their left. And so we start to track patterns. And over time, we can work to undo those patterns and that muscle memory.
Fascinating.
Because it's really the body and these patterns that then create a lot of the mindset and the emotional landscape that we're living in. So we provide new choices in the here and now to do what we couldn't do back then. But that means that we're working with the patterns and the impulses of the present, and that's healing trauma. We don't have to go back to know, like, what was it that was happening? What trauma did I experience? And sometimes memory reconsolidation can happen. I do a lot of training with the military and violent crimes units to help reconsolidate memory. And so for some people that can happen, but remembering is not the same thing as recovering. And so for anyone who's like, I don't know what happened, I don't know what the wound, the root is, you can just work with the body in the here and now, and that can be enough.
I keep getting goosebumps hearing you speak. I just want to acknowledge how incredibly strong you are. Like, I'm really getting emotional over this. Just
thank you.
Having the capacity to work with people who hold so much trauma.
Thanks.
Says a lot in terms of the amount of processing you've done. So,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's people like you who can show up with light. The amount of clearing that you must have had to do in order to hold so much light for other people is really powerful.
Thank you.
I understood very early in my career that it was so much more than just diet and exercise and nutrition. I became an NLP practitioner, and then I did some certification in polyvagal theory and things like that. And so while you're looking at body patterns, I'm also listening to languaging. For
Mm.
when people tell stories about their past, they say, yeah, anyways. Oh, but that's fine.
Right.
Oh, never mind. We don't have to go there. It's like, is what it is. All of these things where it's kind of like you can see where there's the cutting off, the denying of speaking through it and just pushing it down into the body even more. And more often than not, I've met by tears when I ask people, when's the last time you felt true freedom? I'm going to say that again. I'm often met with tears when I ask somebody, when is the last time that you felt true freedom, happiness, or health in your body? And most people don't even know anymore.
Yeah.
And this is a really big problem living in today's world. So these conversations are so important.
Yeah.
And I'm proud to have discussions like this because it is no longer woo-woo.
Yeah.
So let's tie into, there's two things I want to go into. One, you've mentioned that slowing down felt like the hardest part of your healing. I couldn't agree more. I noticed myself the other night just going through a period of acceleration. I can't sit still. I want to get up and move. I'm doing things. The kids are sitting down at dinner and I find myself doing the dishes, putting something away, and I catch myself like, come back into your body.
So I feel that in the resonance, even as you're saying that. Your eyes are getting big. You're moving forward and leaning in. It's kind of like this next thing with the hands.
You got it.
Yeah.
And so in the moment, now I'm able to catch myself, take a breath, come back into my body, recognize that that was a learned behavior and trauma response from my past, and just being aware. And for me, what really supported me is I'm imprinting on my children right now. What do I want them to learn and what do I not want them to learn?
Yeah.
So I went and I sat back down with them. All phones were away, looked them in the eye, and I was 100% present with them again. So can we talk about really, pertains to a lot of women, our inability to feel like we can slow down, to continue to wear this idea of excellence and movement and hypervigilance as a badge of honor when recognizing the consequences from it. How did you move through that and how do you coach your clients through that?
That's such a beautiful question. I feel like it's something, and thank you for sharing your experience. For me, again, coming from a very long line, and I talk about this in my book, how the women dating back at least 4 generations that I studied when I did research and interviews with my grandmother and my mother and my aunt. And we come from this subconscious patterning and belief that we're going to be alone in the world and that our worth is measured by how much we give to others and how successful we are, how independent we can be, self-reliant. And it was something that I wore as a badge of honor. I mean, that's why I went into the women's studies, and I am fully of the belief, especially having a daughter now, that it's so important to be able to stand on your own as a woman and how empowering that is. But I think that there's this feminine and masculine that's so important in all of us and honoring both of those sides. And we were biologically created as women when we look at our cycle, right? We have this 28-day cycle, but we are kind of being pigeonholed into this 24-hour men's cycle, right? So we show up with hustle culture and these wild routines that our body actually can't sustain, and it wasn't meant to sustain. And so there are seasons where when we come into certain phases of, if you're a menstruating women, there are certain seasons where slowing down is actually incredibly productive. We talk about productivity all the time, but productivity without presence is just sabotage, and at some point we're going to have to pay for that. And so as I started to learn more about my cycle, because I used to, when my body would work against let me restart. When I would try to work against my natural rhythm and my natural cycle. And I'm like, no, I need to muscle through. I got projects to do. I got, employees to run. I got this. I said yes to everything. My body over time started telling me, no, we're actually not going to do that. And I think the wake up call for me was actually motherhood. In motherhood, there were memories that started to surface. And that's a beautiful thing about when you become a parent, so many of your childhood memories that were maybe like put up on a shelf or dissociated away, they can start to resurface. This body memory starts to come up. And so I remember getting these anxiety attacks when I started traveling after having my son. And listen, I had, throughout my 20s, I had traveled and worked overseas. I was working in rape crisis and trauma centers. One trip, I was gone for 6 months at a time. Had my now husband, we've been together for 15 years, but I mean, it was hard to be away, but I never got anxiety attacks. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm just going to San Diego for the day for an event. Why am I hyperventilating in the parking garage at the airport? And I remember this song, Martina McBride. What's the song? I Hope You Dance.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know that song?
Oh.
It came on as I was sitting there in the car, and it was early in the morning. I was taking an early morning flight out. And it just brought back all of a sudden this memory came flooding in of me sitting at the end of my bed as a little girl, missing my mom. My mom poured everything into her career. She still does. My mom has cancer, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
And so we talk, her and I have talked about this. We talked about it when she helped me to moderate my book, for an event. And, but she was, her work was such a priority that Monday through Wednesday for 11 years of my upbringing, she would commute to a different state. She had a separate condo that she would stay in. And I don't think I realized growing up that was traumatic. Because when we talk about trauma, again, we say it's always what happens to us, but it's often what we didn't get. Mm-hmm. I needed my mom. I had a roof over my head though, right? Things seemed normal. And so it wasn't until I became a mother that I was like, oh, that's what these panic attacks are. It's these young versions of me coming up saying, it's time to give you now what you couldn't give back then. And so becoming a parent has made me realize that I can allow myself to heal in such these beautiful ways. And so, after my daughter was born, I remember being I had a home birth. And so I was really in my cocoon, but I was taking work meetings 5 days removed from having a baby, and she's on the bed with me and I'm nursing and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, and mind you, this was just 2 years ago, guys. Okay. So again, still working on this. This is not what I want. This doesn't feel aligned at all. There was a pit in my stomach. I felt like I was leaving myself, and I was like, I am living a pace that's not mine anymore. I can't sustain it. And so over the past couple of years, and I've been feeling that whispering and kind of that echoing in my heart and in my spirit that I wanted to homeschool as much as I could in my capacity in a way that worked for our family. I wanted land where we could reset. I didn't want to work full time, so now I'm working part time. These are small things that I do. So I don't know if I answered your question, but...
Oh, you did. And then some. Gosh,
how are you?
Here. Maybe this is a session for me today.
Yeah.
I just think it's because you're touching on so many relevant points. And I know for the listeners, even saying those words, I needed my mom.
Yeah.
Or I needed my dad, right? Mm-hmm. It's core wounds for all of us. Yeah. And often for a lot of listeners, they could have had incredible mothers and fathers where there was no abuse whatsoever, but they just weren't around.
Yeah.
It was something that was very generational, especially in the early 80s and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's part of our wounding as adults because they were our heroes.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel the same. And I wonder for a lot of the men and women listening, it's not regret, but thinking back to when our children were babies.
Yeah.
I wish there was just more time, being more present, not taking the work calls, not hustling to get back, just being fully present to the magic of those moments because they're so therapeutic, right?
Yeah.
And you said something really important that I want to own in on because I find myself coaching a lot of my clients shifting from hating the version of themselves that is the critic, that is the inner judge, that is constantly criticizing and judging other people, that is constantly wishing that their life was different or better. And, there's a hate. That hate resides as hate for yourself.
Yeah.
So can you get to a point of stopping to love that part of yourself? Loving that version of yourself that stepped into that role to protect you wholeheartedly. Your body, this incredible wisdom of your body doing everything that it could to protect you and still trying to do it because it doesn't want to relive the pain that you experienced in the past.
Yeah.
Can you simply stop in those moments of judgment and criticism, say, oh, okay, see you. We don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for showing up. You don't have to do that. I
Mm-hmm.
love you for that. Thank you,
Mm-hmm.
thank you, thank you. Right?
And
It's very
even right there,
powerful.
so I just want to point out what you just did is you just placed a hand on your heart.
Yeah.
And for some people, you know, I know some of my clients, they say those words and they're like, I don't feel that at all. Like that
Yeah.
doesn't land. That doesn't land. But touch, what you just did,
Mm-hmm.
even sometimes if we say affirmations or speak to ourselves and it doesn't land, because there could be resistance to that. Touch is such a beautiful way to really anchor into that. So even if you say it and you don't feel it, can you place a hand on your heart and just notice like, but what is it to have this attunement right here?
Mm-hmm.
I think so much of what we're talking about is the abandonment wounds that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us feel abandoned in many ways, whether it's the state of the world that we live in, and especially now, you know, here in the Western world, whether it's cost of living, whether it's cultural conditioning. We live in a time where it's hard to live for many people on single income. You know, it's hard for families to live on single incomes.
Oh, yeah.
And so most of the women that I work with, most of who I work with is women, but I work with men too.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them are working moms who are struggling. And there's so much guilt especially when they start to learn the science of attachment and how that plays into our own emotional resilience, how that helps our nervous systems develop, how the first few years in life are so foundational. They look back and they're like, wow, I've done damage. And I just want to remind people that your nervous system and your life will follow a predictable path of patterns based on what you experienced early on, but it's not set in stone. It is just a path, and we can change it with intention. And we are these wonderful creatures that can reorganize, that can renew time and time again. And so I just want to put that reminder out there, because I live with that guilt sometimes of like, I could be doing more, or, you know, so I think that's important to state, but also to just that self-abandonment piece when you're talking about like the perspective of looking at ourselves as something to fix, criticizing ourselves. That makes sense because when we were kids, you mentioned earlier, we look at our parents like they're superheroes, right? Like they can't do anything wrong. And so it's hard for a child to conceptualize that my parents just didn't have the capacity then. It's hard for us to accept that, oh, they were just a human. I like to say my parents were children raising children. It sets it in perspective, you know, no one is perfect. And so what children do is they won't believe, oh, I should have been given more and I deserve more, even if it was outside of their capacity. Instead, they don't say that was the problem. They say, I am the problem.
I'm the problem.
And so this self-abandonment, or this abandonment that we have then turns into self-abandonment, right? I am a problem to fix. There's something wrong with me. And we start to, again, reach outside of ourselves to find whatever the solution is, not realizing that actually the answers were inside all along, that we were worthy all along. I don't know if that makes sense, but that was just kind of in my...
Yeah, and I wonder too, how many people identify with, and still, knowing what they do now, how many people still identify with, it was my fault.
Yeah.
I'm broken. I'm the problem.
Yeah.
I still need to be fixed. And they're still holding on to that. And then they go out into the world and they mask it with things like biohacking or productivity, or for a lot of people, exercising.
Yeah.
When they think that they're helping themselves, but they're just masking it. So what would you say is the fine line between regulation and self-distraction?
I love that. Regulation and self-distraction. So I always kind of correlate the two here between regulation and relation. Again, we can focus so much on what are the regulation techniques, what are the somatic hacks, what are the nervous system practices, or the things that I can do. And I see that a lot really in this world that we live in, where things are so quick to consume and, you know, very fast paced. And I'll just do this 5-minute somatic release exercise and my trauma is going to be gone. It's not how it happens. And so I would say again that it's more about the relationship and the intention behind it.
Yeah.
If you're doing it, and you said this earlier, from a place of nourishment to you're doing it because you honor who you are and you know what you're capable of, and you're doing it from a place of self-love rather than a place of, I mean, quite honestly, self-hatred. I think a lot of the work that I did early on was from a place of self-hatred. And you might not know, like, well, how do I know the difference between that? Take it into the body. Notice, like, as I'm working out or when I'm done, do I feel lifted? Do I feel more expanded in my body? Do I feel like I can breathe deeper? Does my spine feel more straight and rigid? Does my chin go up? Do my eyes feel bigger? Or do I just now feel tired? Do I feel collapsed in the shoulders? Do I feel achy, or do I feel not here? Those are going to be some of the telltale signs as to whether or not what you just did depleted you or nourished you. Yeah.
So good. And that's a good question. A lot of people don't even know how to tap into that feeling.
Yeah.
And often I coach my clients when they're trying to turn on that guidance system. It's almost like you have to imagine, well, how would your inner child feel doing that? How would your inner child feel knowing that you're going out to binge to mask your problems, whether that's with food, alcohol, or drugs, right? And instantly it's like, oh my God, it just breaks you down completely, right? So, Britt, I really want people to understand what somatic experiencing is. So what's actually happening in a session with you then, with your clients?
I love that question. It looks very different from traditional therapy. It's much slower, and the way that I describe it is we're getting out of the head and into the body. So how that works is we are practicing something called pendulation. And pendulation is really following the body's natural biorhythm. So people, or our stress response cycle, people assume that being regulated means calm, cool, and collected all the time. That is not regulation. I love that you have the polyvagal language in your back pocket, so you know this, but having a regulated nervous system means having a flexible nervous system.
You got it.
And we always love to use the nervous system ladder as an analogy. So just imagine, for everyone listening, that at the top of the nervous system ladder is your ventral vagal state of rest and digest. In the middle of the ladder is your fight or flight response, your sympathetic state of the nervous system. And this is where you're mobilized with that adrenaline and cortisol. And then at the bottom of the ladder is your dorsal vagal state, what we call your state of collapse, shut down. Think of it not as mobilization, but immobilization, kind of like hibernation.
Yeah.
It's important to note, though, that even when we're down in that collapse state, you still have all that adrenaline and cortisol there. And so when we think about trauma, again, trauma is when we are stuck on that ladder. And having a flexible, resilient, regulated nervous system means that we can move up and down that ladder all day long without getting stuck. I would say an average healthy biorhythm probably goes up and down that ladder roughly 100 times a day.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So when people hear that, they're like, wait, what? It's not being calm all the time. So it's like, as I was telling you today, I was driving in and I hit some of that construction traffic, and then the tree trimmer on your road was blocking my car. And I'm like, am I going to get there on time? And as I was sitting there, I could feel my heart. I'm like, okay, tracking. My heart is speeding up a little bit. My palms have gotten sweaty. I'm becoming hypervigilant, and I'm wondering, am I going to be late? Oh, am I going to be late? That's a moment of activation. And so what can happen, though, is, again, we can get stuck in those bottom parts of the system. So in an SE session, what we would do is we actually don't have to go straight to the trauma. It's usually me asking someone in the session, what's been going on lately? Is there something that's been a challenge in your life? Was there something unpleasant that happened that you wanted to really process? And so what we'll do is we'll do facilitated pendulation. We'll start off by being in a moment of deactivation. Okay, so pendulation, think of it like a grandfather clock that goes back and forth. Okay, same thing as moving up and down that ladder. When you have a dysregulated nervous system, it's like your grandfather clock is broken and it's just jammed over here in activation, activation, activation. So what we do is we'll start with resourcing. Can we get into the body? Can we notice the things around us? We orient through the sensory motor system, which is a great way to show, not tell, because the nervous system doesn't come from cognition. We show the nervous system that, I can settle a little bit. I can be present. We do that for a few minutes. We likely find an anchor, something that feels nice. So for me, like, your eyes have just been such a settling anchor for me. So I'm just look at your eyes, right? So it might be co-regulation. It might be noticing the movement of the leaves in the tree outside. And then usually we take that inward and we're like, how is your body showing you that feels good? And so it's, oh, I just noticed I was able to fill my belly with breath and notice that my shoulder diaphragms dropped a little bit and that my hands opened up. There's more of like a settling and a relaxation.
Beautiful.
And then we'll say, yeah, can we just notice that for a minute? And we let it linger. We savor it. And then we gently start to touch into, okay, what's a moment recently that you wanted to kind of, discuss? Now, mind you, we're not going into trauma. We're just working to expand the nervous system's ability to be with discomfort. So it's, recently I got this email from my boss and they want to have a meeting and it's kind of out of the blue. And I'm just like, I'm worrying that I'm going to get fired or it's going to be bad news. And so as they start to say that, I'm tracking on the other end how their body starts to shift.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of things that will start to happen. Their posture, the pace or tone of their voice, the prosody, the eyes. Mm-hmm. And so what I love to do as an SEP is say, yeah, I just noticed this happen. And they'll be like, oh. So it starts to bring this explicit kind of conscious awareness to, oh, my body did that. And then usually that's a pattern. That's a reaction from the past.
Yeah.
And so we'll be with it. We'll say, is there anything your body wants to do with that? And maybe it's that, as I'm noticing that, I kind of want to like lean forward in my chair. Can we just lean forward? Can we put some weight into the legs and just see what happens next? We ask that a lot. Can we just see what happens next? And then there's usually a lot of silence, which makes people uncomfortable at first. But we just allow space for the body to do what it knows how to do. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it'll be like, oh, I'm starting to notice my legs are trembling or shaking, or my large leg muscles are pulsing, or my toes are pushing down into the ground. Great. Is that okay? Does that feel tolerable? Can we allow that to be here? Sure. And then usually after a time, usually about just like, I don't know, a minute to 3 minutes, the body then naturally comes back and sways in the other direction. So it goes into some kind of integration where it's like, oh, I'm seeing you're stretching now, or you're starting to orient to the room again. So we guide our clients to move in and out of these facilitated pendulations, which allow for small moments to kind of lift the lid of the pressure cooker for some of those stress hormones to come through the body. And we start in the shallow end, and oftentimes we just kind of wade our way into the deep end. We're not throwing people into the deep, which can feel very overwhelming to the nervous system, like recall therapy, like we talked about. Yeah. We make it tolerable. We stretch the system without further stressing it. And over time, you're building the muscle and the capacity for the system to hold more, contain more, move through more.
It's actually the most favorite part of my job. Those moments when you're witnessing somebody and it's like this shift of vibration from feeling out of alignment into the release, or the exhale into alignment, and supporting them and recognizing how to decode that languaging of your body. Yeah. And it's really great, for people to have the mindfulness around the eye movement that you were talking about, the discomfort, the leaning back, I notice a lot of people talk with the shorter part of their, with their breath, right? They're not taking full deep breaths anymore, and just noticing those patterns that your body's holding on to as a cue to take that exhale or to seek what area needs investigation for you to learn how to process. And I really want to hover, can we make this go viral? If the intention is to move through a regulated state to dysregulated, but with trust and wisdom of your body, having the confidence to learn how to move back and forth up to 100 times throughout the day, just recognizing when that happens is normal. It's not about, oh, I didn't wake up calm today, my entire day was thrown off, and just identifying with that version of yourself. Yeah. Or when something bad happens throughout the day, like getting the email from your boss, that needs to dictate the rest of your day. Yeah. Gosh, I wish we could celebrate that.
Absolutely. I love the quote from Dr. Gabor Mate that says that your body is having a necessary and appropriate response to the circumstance or the environment that's happening right now. Yeah. And again, just that belief that your body is working for you. It knows exactly what to do if we just allow it to do that.
Yeah. A beautiful part about yogic training is understanding the symptoms within the body that you're holding on to, whether that's gut issues, aches and pains, the pain in your back, the pain in your shoulder, your migraines, and how that's associated to your emotional well-being. Yeah. What are some common symptoms that you see people living with today?
Yeah. Chronic migraines and overthinking is often we like to say it's an underfeeling problem.
Guilty.
Yeah. But also too, so for instance, like when we look at traumatic patterns, so and not always, this is not always the case, but sometimes what I'll find is that when there is a lot of top-heavy activation, whether it's overthinking or migraines, sometimes that can be tied back to experiences where there was a boundary rupture in the lower part of the body, right? Because the lower part of the bodies will say, this is too much for me to feel, whether it's the pelvic bowl, whether it's the stomach, and the digestion really holds anxiety, terror, fear. And so it'll push it upward, right? And so if you find that you're someone who does overthink, someone who has migraines, headaches, jaw, right? Jaw tension, that is usually top heavy activation. And I would say my encouragement and kind of the roadmap to really supporting yourself and bringing the body into more coherence would be, can I notice the lower parts of my body? And that doesn't have to be hips and belly. That can be like, can I just notice my feet on the ground? Can I push my toes into the ground and notice how that feels as my calf muscles engage? And as I feel the joints really kind of constrict a little bit. You want to do that for like 30 seconds. You might feel a tiny tremble and then let go and just see how that feels and track, like, how does it feel now from the inside of my body out? And so again, when you see localized pain or symptoms in certain parts of the body, it's usually because the rest of the body is out of congruence and incoherent. We call it fixity to flow. There's, trauma can definitely get stuck in. I know you said joints, diaphragms, certain parts of the viscera. And we know that even when we look at, certain cancer diagnosis, that's going to be commonly contributed localized parts of the body with certain kinds of emotions that are stored or
Heart
traumas.
palpitations.
Exactly. Yep. And so, what I'm saying is, the overall theme or formula here is, when you're noticing something localized in the body, we actually don't want to hyperfixate on it. That's what a lot of people do. They'll be like, oh, I'm having pain here, and I'm just going to focus on that pain. Because what you're doing is you're actually creating attentional networks in the brain to fight against it, which then creates more tension, which then creates more of the pain. And so instead, what we will commonly ask in a session with someone is, it's like, okay, is that tolerable enough to notice as you're having that pain? Yeah, that's okay. I'll usually ask from a 1 to 10, how intense is it? And it's like a 4 or 5. Okay. Can you notice somewhere else in the body that feels easier to be with? And so you're kind of just noticing different parts of the body. But as you do that, it's like you're like, oh yeah, there are other parts of me that are here and that are available and that can provide support, or that are not in pain or dysregulated. And so that brings more of that flow, that fixity. I would say that self-touch, again, is fantastic. Touch is such a primal language that we've really lost, I feel like, in, especially post-COVID world. Touch is such a biological imperative. And it's so healing, skin to skin with kids. I mean, we're brought in the world wired for touch. It helps us to regulate, helps us to heal. And so touch in certain parts of the body can help open up physiological flow. It can help to be like, okay, as I'm touching, there's movement. Or, when you place your hand on someone's back and they'll go, just opens the breath, right? Yeah. So even touch can be a wonderful way to work with certain symptoms in the body.
Beautiful.
I know it sounds so simple, but
it's the most powerful.
Yeah.
And this is, do not underestimate the power of these simple things as being part of your greatest healing protocol ever.
Absolutely.
Something that I do want to mention with air of caution, a lot of my clients and people in my community will reach out asking about, group somatic healing experience where you can go and check in for 2 hours and then leave. Tell me your thoughts. Yeah, I put my back up a little bit because I think it's very irresponsible of practitioners to put people in that environment to all of a sudden just process when a lot of people haven't been in touch with those emotions, and to be in a group where they don't have the skills afterwards to recalibrate or come back into their body. So I saw you nodding your head. So you agree. Yeah,
I do.
Thank you.
I agree. So, a lot of the work that we see out there in the somatic healing space is, it's not titrated enough. So titration is one of the founding principles of somatic experiencing. So again, somatic experiencing is one modality under the somatic healing umbrella. But in somatic experiencing, titration is something that we practice, which means these small baby steps. So Peter Levine really kind of borrowed this term from chemistry. In chemistry, titration is where you take one little dropper of something, you drop it into another solution, it fizzles, and then it fades. And then another drop, it fizzles and it fades. And he knew that the nervous system really operated in the same way. Same equals safe with the nervous system. It wants predictable patterns. It wants familiarity. So when you try and make these big changes, or when you try and push for force or these big kind of cathartic releases, what can happen, and we do see this sometimes in the, my brain just went away. What's the ayahuasca? Plant medicine.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can see these in like plant medicine rituals that are not integrated enough or titrated enough. But essentially what can happen is you can blow out your nervous system and you can find yourself in a much more dysregulated place than you were before. So the Body First Healing program is a program that I created back in 2017. And it's taken many shapes and forms, but now it is a group program. But one thing I want to touch on is every Monday, we do what I call the nervous system gym. So we come together for 30 minutes in a group setting and we do somatic practices, but it is not what you see on mainstream social media. It's not us raging. It's not us screaming. It's not us hitting pillows. Half the time, most weeks, we are practicing slowing down, being present, because that's half the equation, right? Like we can't actually do any kind of activation work or healing work if the body doesn't know how to pendulate into that settling. So that's usually what we do. The activation work, though, is where we might, so for instance, this week we worked with contraction and expansion. So, and we just worked with the legs. So very slowly over 30 minutes, we contracted the toes and then we released. We worked with the calves. The calves we often call your second heart because there's so much blood flow that goes through there. And then we worked with the quadriceps and the hamstrings.
Beautiful.
And we just contracted and expanded. But we did those cycles over 30 minutes, right? So it was so titrated. Again, we're stretching the nervous system, not stressing it. But there are always, just like in yoga, there are always modifications that are offered. So if it feels like too much, it's important that you're working with someone who's not telling you, you're going to do this and you're going to feel this after.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Modifications and disclaimers always need to be provided. So if this feels like too much for you, just track that in your system. How do you know it's too much? And then instead of clenching your toes, can you visualize? And we have a scale from 1 to 10. How activated do I feel? If it goes above a certain threshold, then we know that's outside of my unique capacity. I'm going to pull it back. So we visualize the toes instead. If the visualizing even still feels like too much, then it's okay. Can we come back to our resourcing and our anchor that we identified? So we spend 10 minutes resourcing and orienting and finding an anchor. It was the trees that I found outside. I'm going to resource because this exercise feels like too much. But yeah, there can be, without proper integration, without titration, and without the disclaimer and this awareness that everyone's nervous system is so unique because it's so historied.
Absolutely.
You could find yourself doing more harm than good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for calling that out. And thank you for mentioning the tips with your Body First protocol. I think that that's such a powerful practice. And I really want listeners to take away that all of these subtle modalities are often the most impactful. It's those moments where a practitioner guides you into stillness and what it feels like to be back in your body again with safety that all of a sudden change the trajectory of how you feel.
Yeah.
You change the trajectory of how you feel. You're making better choices for yourself. You're making better choices for yourself. All of a sudden showing up to live, making healthy choices every day doesn't become so challenging. It becomes you. So thank you for that.
Definitely.
I've got to get you on the road. So to wrap things up,
You're good.
Body First Healing is the name of your book. We're going to put all the links out to everybody. How can people find you and be part of your program?
Yeah. So everything is Body First Healing. It just makes it easy.
Yeah,
So if you go to bodyfirsthealing.com, you'll learn about the Body First Healing program, which is a 6-month beautiful container where we learn about the nervous system, we learn about your nervous system, but the experiential work is important. Like you can't just learn about trauma. You can't just learn about patterns because, again, the nervous system is not a learning system. It is a feeling system. And so it's an experiential program as well. It's a beautiful group container because, again, so many of us, we experienced trauma that was compounded because we experienced it in isolation and in abandonment. And so to be witnessed and to be held in your suffering can really compound the healing. So, yeah, that's where you'll find more about that. I have the Body First Healing podcast, the Body First Healing book, and soon in 2026, we are launching the Body First Healing practitioner course, where we will do live trainings in Montana.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
I'm such a big fan of your work and of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing everything today.
Thank you.
I really think that in the world of health and wellness, this is the one thing that we need to go viral because that is true integrative healthcare. This needs to be the future. Nothing else will work until we recognize this aspect of ourselves and people sharing your story to really kind of for people to understand. And thanks for offering the tips as well. If this work is feeling overwhelming to anyone who's listening, there's options.
Yeah.
There's options to telling the beautiful story of your nervous system. And I think that the acknowledgement of that is a beautiful place to begin. So thank you for being here. I can't wait to have you back again.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
it's
would love to be
happening.
back. Yeah, let's do it. Let's stay connected. This was wonderful.
Wonderful. Thank you.